Hello, Jason. It's Tuesday, March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day. I should not have done what I did last night.
Which was, in fact, going to bed at a reasonable hour completely sober because I don't celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Though I am sporting a rather Irish green today. Now, by all accounts, I'm one quarter Irish, so you may be asking, Steve, why aren't you celebrating your heritage? And the answer is quite simple. It's the same reason that I don't celebrate Bastille Day or Bonfire Night or Oktoberfest, because I'm equal parts French, Scottish, and German as well. And to be perfectly honest, it annoys me when people insist that you celebrate a holiday even though it's not part of what you consider to be your own personal culture. If I had a nickel for every time someone who clearly was not Irish pinched me for not wearing green on St. Patrick's Day, I'd have like 70 cents probably. I'd be rich. And this idea of enforced culture is something I want to talk about for a large portion of what remains of this video. In particular, I want to talk about the differences between Canada and the United States as we deal with other cultures coming into our own. And the differences in the way that we deal with other cultures is summed up in the two terms used to describe the ways that our countries deal with other cultures. That being the American melting pot and Canadian multiculturalism. So let's start off with America. America basically exists because they believe that any culture can come in and become part of a unified whole. This is the melting pot. The problem with that unified whole is that it builds this idea of an ideal or a perfect American. And any difference between a specific person within the collective and the ideal is identified as an other. So when you see a picture like this, you have an example of distinct groups within the unified whole of America. There's Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, Native Americans, African Americans. Basically everything except white is given an identifier. And so any evident difference between you and the ideal is something that divides you from becoming a full or authentic American. And that's essentially where the melting pot fails, because if you don't look exactly like this, then you're not American, you're some halfway American. Canada, by contrast, has multiculturalism, which insists that no matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like, what you sound like, or what you do, if you live here, you're Canadian. And so if we hold up the same picture in Canada, we're not given a system of qualifiers. It's just a Canadian and a Canadian and a Canadian and a Canadian. That's not to say, though, that in Canada we just completely whitewash culture altogether. We still have our different backgrounds, traditions, and cultures. We just are encouraged to participate and share rather than hiding or destroying our own cultures. In other words, we're not forced to destroy our histories and traditions in order to fit in, but rather we're encouraged to share those and allow other people to join in as well. And so we break down barriers not by separating or eliminating the other, but by separating and eliminating the ideal. And which, at the end of the day, is what really annoys me about mandatory participation in something like St. Patrick's Day. Even though I do have Irish heritage, I find no purpose in celebrating a day which has essentially become a mandatory drunk fest. And so, no St. Patrick's Day for me. But by the same token, I find no contradiction in someone who's atheist or agnostic celebrating the more secular aspects of something like Christmas or Easter. And that's the great thing about Canada. Just because a holiday originated in one tradition doesn't mean it can't be embraced by another. Multiculturalism for the win! And now for some challenge progress updates. On the weekend, I finished reading Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49, and immediately afterwards started reading Ellen DeGeneres' Seriously I'm Kidding, which, being a rather quick read, I finished on Sunday night. And then I started reading Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs, which is turning out to be a really interesting book so far. So let's get to work on a couple of really quick reviews, starting with Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49. As I mentioned before, it's a postmodern novel, and it's pretty good. The plot centers on a conspiracy incrementally found by the main character, Oedipus Moss. At least, we're led to believe there's a conspiracy, though later on in the novel we're sort of meant to question that, I think. This is the great thing about postmodern novels, is that generally speaking there isn't one way to read them. In fact, if you have the gall to assert so, you can read this book pretty much any way you want. There could be a conspiracy, there could not be a conspiracy. Oedipus could be on an LSD trial, or she could be on an LSD trial and there's a conspiracy. At the end of the day, the so-called truth of the novel isn't what really matters, it's just your experience of questioning the truth. As I stated before, I was supposed to read this novel as part of an American culture class that focused on sort of alternate forms of thinking, if that makes sense. And I really wish that I had finished the novel in that class, though I did get pretty close to the end. Because rereading it, there are so many connections to other novels that we read in that class that I could have made, but unfortunately can't now because I don't really remember the specifics. Suffice it to say, though, I really enjoyed this novel. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 for literary value and a 3 out of 5 for entertainment. Like I said, I then moved on to Seriously, I'm Kidding by Ellen DeGeneres, which was my biography for the month. Which may be a little bit misleading because it's not strictly speaking a biography, it's more of a humorous look at the past couple of years of her life. One thing I will say for absolute certain is that Ellen DeGeneres is as hilarious as she's ever been. She has this great technique of setting up the rules for her joke before she actually makes the joke. And so the setup and the punchline seem to be part of the same process, which is really cool. And I will say that in a book, she makes some very interesting attempts to change up what you might expect from a biography or at the very least non-fiction humor book. For example, being aware of the demographics of her show, she tries to pander to some different demographics in her book, like children, who she provides coloring pages for, or teenagers, for whom she provides an entire chapter in text speak. So considering the near constant humor of the book and the attempts that she makes to shake up the format, I'm going to give her a 5 for entertainment and a 3 for literary value. Moving on, I've also made progress in the running challenge, which you can see for yourself at www.zombiesrungame.com/sahuffman1987. Link down there. I had previously run 18 miles, and I've added another 5.98 miles to that over the past week or so, when the weather has been kind enough to permit me to run. So that brings my total up to 23.98 miles, and I hope to add to that significantly over the coming weeks, because the weather is going to be a lot nicer. And at last, time for Wait a minute. We're done chess. We're done chess. It's over. Yes, we're done chess, but that means we get to move on to a new game, which, as you said in your past video, is Battleship. I'd like to start off by saying that for the purpose of maintaining the integrity of this game, we've appointed a judge, hereby referred to as Judge Dredd, to whom, by now, we should both have sent our setups for this game. And so, without further ado, let me officially welcome Mark Farine to our ranks as an official member of the Rad Bromance Project, in the capacity of Judge Dredd. To be perfectly honest, I'm going to try and find as many opportunities as I can to call him Judge Dredd over the coming weeks. And so, with our pieces locked in, let me make the first move in our game of Battleship, E5.